Hello, everybody. My name is Gian Luca Gardini, and I would like to talk to you today briefly about the historical and political context of European Union, Latin America, and the Caribbean relations. And if we look at the long history of Europe-Latin America relations, we really have to start even before the times of the European Union. And we have to look back at the colonial legacy in terms of economic and social models that essentially Spain and Portugal left with Latin America. So an economy that is export oriented and based on extraction of resources of the soil and the subsoil and shipment of these resources toward the external market. But we should also look at the influence that European ideas and European events had on Latin American independence. For instance, the ideals of the French Revolution, liberty, fraternity, equality, that characterize still today most Latin American constitutions and also national anthems. But we should also think of the impact that the Napoleonic Wars had on the capacity of Spain and Portugal to resist independence movements in Latin America. The Napoleonic Wars actually weakened Spain and Portugal to the extent that they couldn't fight against the independence movement of Latin America. So in this sense, events and ideas in Europe are very much behind the entire process of Latin American independence. Then we had a decline of European influence in Latin America after the two world conflicts, and especially after World War II, because Europe was very busy with its own reconstruction. And the creation of the European Economic Community did not change that pattern until the mid-1980s, when Spain and Portugal, the former colonial masters, actually entered the European Union and pushed for the EU to include Latin America and the Caribbean in the EU external agenda. And this relationship became denser and denser with time, with the first agreement between the EU and Latin American regional grouping in the 1980s, then with the creation of a strategic partnership with Latin America in 1999, the Madrid Action Plan that added the social and economic dimension to this strategic partnership. And finally, also with the bilateral strategic partnership between the EU and Brazil. So how is the situation today? Well, let me tell you, it's quite positive. In economic terms, the EU is still the first investor in terms of stock in Latin America. The EU is the third trade partner of Latin America and the Caribbean after the US and China. And the EU is still the first provider of aid cooperation to Latin America and the Caribbean. And the political dimension still remains very important, even if we haven't had a top-level political summit since 2015, but there are good hopes that in 2023 the system will be resumed. So the model of relation that the EU proposes to Latin America is a very complex and also very well-articulated one that spans across different levels, the regional, the sub-regional, and the bilateral, and across different thematic points, different themes like political dialogue, trade and economy, and cooperation. But the EU should also pay attention not to miss further opportunities in Latin America. The EU influence and perceived presence in Latin America seems to be on the decline. However, we should consider that the context of EU-Latin American relationship is not very propitious, is not very favorable to the strengthening of this bi-regional relation. Events such as the COVID-19 pandemic, the rise of China, the questioning of globalization and multilateralism the phase of redefinition of the US international role, the war in Ukraine and its possible impact on the future of the liberal international order, all question somehow the traditional instruments of EU-Latin American relations. Still, this relationship has always been characterized by ups and downs, but in a context of relative stability, of solid and cordial relations in terms of political dialogue, trade relations, and development cooperation. So overall, and precisely because of this difficult context, we should value the EU-LAC relation, and we should really consider this relation as extremely positive, especially taking into consideration the systemic constraints that this relationship faces. Thank you.